I wanted to make a light-hearted video today, but frankly the news over the past week has just made it so I can't do that. Recently, a black homeless man named Jordan Neely was, in my words, I would say he was lynched on the New York subway. And look, me telling you to read these books isn't going to change the fact that he was murdered on the subway. And it's not going to change the fact that the person who murdered him is being congratulated for doing so, because Neely had a history of criminal offences, and because at the point in time under which he was murdered, he seemed to be going through a mental health episode. And yeah, me telling you to read these books probably won't help. That, unfortunately, it probably won't make a change with the issues that we see in society, American society, even society here in the UK. Today's the day of the coronation, where we're seeing a old rich man have hundreds of millions of pounds spent on him, whilst we have people who can barely afford food right now. We actually had money diverted away from food banks today to fund the coronation. So the world is just messed up. But let me go to the books. I'll have a skip to at this point, but let me just tell you like 3 books to read to understand race relations and what it's like to be a black person in the US. Between the World and Me by ta-Nehisi Coates is a very interesting book about the life as a black American, the thoughts and the struggles that they have as an individual going through their life in general. There are sections where they talk about how they fear for their child, how they fear for their own lives, how even little things that happened have resulted in them or their child facing discrimination, when in other instances that would never happen to a person, because it just doesn't make sense for discrimination to happen. It's not just, very outward discrimination, people calling them swear words, people, saying X, Y, and Z to them, but it's also a lot of microaggressions, like how they treat them or their family compared to how they treat other people, the assumptions people make about them and their family. It's actually a very powerful book. It's very short, I believe. It's it's a very short read, so I would recommend it. I listened to the audiobook version and read it at the same time because it was something I was trying to do. But yeah, I recommend you check this out. Notes of a Native Son by James Baldwin. I believe I've spoken about this book before, but I personally like James Baldwin's writing and I like his speeches. I know he's not everyone's cup of tea, so if you don't like James Baldwin's writing, obviously you don't need to read this. I personally do, and he talks a lot about his life experience in this as a black American, but also his experience in Paris, and sort of him comparing what it was like in both circumstances. I do feel like maybe he's a little bit kind to Paris, but also he was writing this book many years ago, whereas now France has moved further and further right-wing and has moved further and further towards discrimination once again. So obviously some of the stuff he will be talking about won't, one-on-one align with what we see is happening in places like France and the UK and the US at the moment, but it is a very interesting read. Again, this is mostly because I like the way Baldwin reads and I like the way he speaks in interviews. If you haven't heard of James Baldwin, look up many of his interviews. You could listen to him speaking. You don't necessarily need to read this. A lot of his speeches are very good. A lot of the interviews he does are very good, especially those probably post when he moves away from the US. So I do highly recommend James Baldwin. Honorable mentions: White Tears, Brown Scars. It's a book by Ruby Hamad. I think it is, if I had to write a list of books in my lifetime that I say you have to read, it's one of the books that's on there. I have a whole video about it. I'll try and link it somewhere. Definitely go and watch that, and definitely go and read that. If any of these books, 100% go and read that one. I'm just not talking about it because I have a whole video about it, I believe. Finally, A New Formation by Callum Jacobs. I know I've spoken about this book like 100 times, but frankly I think it might have been the one book I read last year where I was like, this was the best book I read in terms of the fact that it was the book that I valued the most reading. Obviously, some of you may know I've recently just fallen in love with football, and I read this book and it's incredible. It talks about the role of black footballers in football and their place, not just in football but in society, the influences they have had in society, and also the way football has reacted to them. It is very much mostly UK centric. It does delve into some stuff that happens in Europe and a little bit in the US, but it is mostly about UK football and UK footballers. I think it's incredible. There are some interviews with some fantastic footballers. There are pieces by Callum Jacobs himself which are really good. There are interview pieces. I highly recommend it. Even if you're not interested in football, I think you should read this book, because it tells you the impact that representation, it tells you the impact that the struggle even that certain people have because of their ethnicity, because of their race. It is a highly impactful book. It really made me think about football more. It really made me actually want to consider working in football in a capacity around recruitment to help people of different races and backgrounds get into the game. So those are the 4 books I recommend. Obviously, again, me telling you to read these books isn't going to have a massive impact on the world. It's not going to change the fact Jordan Neely was brutally executed on the train. It's not going to change that, and I don't know if it's going to move the needle of anything. But if you are interested in reading these and they might help you understand them, or if you know someone who needs to understand better, try and get them to read one of these. Again, the Ruby Hamad book, out of all 4 of them, is the one I highly recommend the most, just because, at least for me, it's the one that opened my eyes the widest and it gave me a greater understanding. It is mostly about the impact on the lives of black and brown, I guess all minority women have, and the impact that, you know, non-minority women and men have on their lives. But it does also touch on the lives of BIPOC men as well. So I highly recommend you read those books. Again, the Ruby Hamad one is the one you should read the most. And yeah, thanks for watching this again. I was hoping to come back and have a really fun, exuberant video, but no. Yeah, thanks for watching. I got this hat whilst I was on holiday. I guess that's one not depressing thing I can talk about. But yeah, thanks for watching. Like, subscribe, share the video with a friend or family member, and hey, I hope you read a great book today, and hopefully one that will help open your mind.